So, welcome to the webinar today. We are so excited to have everybody here. And I am really excited to be talking to Tony today about EDI. We did decide that since, some people may be coming on just a little bit late, that we would, before we started getting into introductions, I think, and actually something that a lot of people are probably very interested in is like what good TV is out there. So we figured we would start with talking about what shows we're streaming now and maybe what our favorite TV show is. So Tony, why don't you go first?
Okay. First disclaimer, I have two young kids at home, 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. So the amount of, if I was going to give you the actual runtime, I would have to give you a bunch of Disney Plus TV shows or movies, but I'll try to reserve it to the 30 minutes after 9 o'clock that I seem to get every night to do something on my own agenda. I've been watching a show called Billions, which is on Amazon Prime right now. So I find that one very interesting. A few seasons in, and then this one is a little bit more specific, I guess. But my wife and I are actually preparing to do an Italy trip in a couple of months. So we've been watching the Stanley Tucci Searching for Italy, where it goes from each region and tests different, or basically tries out food and culture and stuff like that. So we've been using that as a cheat code to some of our travel plans, and we've been watching that just about every night for the last couple of weeks. It's been very interesting.
Well, that's awesome. I love Stanley Tucci. He is one of my favorites. Something about him is just great,
It's enjoyable. I mean, it'd be enjoyable even if we weren't doing the trip, but super helpful with the trip because he goes to very specific regions and specific restaurants and foods, and you just kind of jot down the stuff that you want to take note of. So
that's awesome.
how about
That's
you, Courtney?
cool.
What are the major TV shows on your side?
Man, so I like these shows where my husband picks at me for my TV. So it's usually either like sci-fi or some kind of I used to love to watch House. And my two most favorite shows that I've been watching lately, earlier in the winter, I was watching the new version of MacGyver, the reboot.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was like 7 seasons. And my husband's like, Courtney, this is so stupid. You cannot take string and duct tape and a paper clip and make a bomb out of it. And like, he's like, this show's so cheesy. But I'm like, no, it's not that cheesy. That's like a tenth of this. That's like a tiny sliver of the show. It's really watching the fun relationships between the people. And then, so I don't know if I would recommend that one, but I loved it. I watched all 7 seasons and I just couldn't wait to get home so I could watch it some more because I felt like they were my friends. And then the other one I've been watching lately is a little bit similar to that in terms of it's the fun relationships of the people that are in the show. And it's called Royal Pains, and it's about this guy who's a concierge doctor in the Hamptons. And
I've not heard that one.
Yeah, and it's got like a bunch of seasons too. So, there's a lot of opportunity for character development but it's very similar. There's always a gimmick. There's always like last night they had to put bacon over a wound because it had to draw out this like parasite. Like there's a bunch of these little kind of gimmicky things, but it's a fun show. Both of those are very fun.
Oh, that's good. It's too much good TV, that's for sure.
It's not as highbrow as Stanley Tucci, that's for sure. But and I did enjoy. I think I watched. Was it Billions? What's the other one that everyone's talking about? That's Succession. I watched Succession. I haven't seen Billions yet. I need to watch Billions.
Yeah.
But I like those types of shows too. The drama of it all.
Totally. Yeah. That's where it really gets you.
The character development. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, there's always something good about TV for me. Like I don't really like to drink very much. So that's when I relax and can just kind of like take my brain off and, so I like to watch TV at night. I probably watch a little bit more than from 9 to 9:30. I probably watch from like 8:30 to 10.
Yeah, though, it is just the shut your brain off piece. I feel like I need that at the end of the day, talking retail supply chain and 3PLs and all that kind of stuff. You got to shut the brain off every once in a while.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to what we do, isn't there?
Yeah.
And so, why don't you tell us, Tony, where are you actually located?
So I am out of Minneapolis, St. Paul area up in Minnesota. So if you get flavors of the accent, if I hold on to my O's, don't ask me to say boat. I'll hold on to that a little bit too much. But yeah, up in the Midwest and in the Minnesota area. How about you?
Okay, cool. I'm from Atlanta. I thought you're from when I first met you, I thought you were from Canada because of your O's.
Pretty
Yeah.
pretty close. Short drive away, that's for sure.
So do you watch a ton of hockey?
I'm not as big of a hockey person, but hockey is very, very big in Minnesota. The state of hockey, and my kids, especially my son, has seemed to take a liking to it. So we take him to games every once in a while, and he wants to turn on the TV. So it's hard to escape it when you're up in Minnesota. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. I went to a game in Chicago and it was really fun. And obviously hockey's not that big of a thing in the South because there's no ice. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's a fun. I mean, that's a very memorable. That's been probably 10 years since I went to a hockey game. And I still remember how much fun I had at that event. So
Oh, it's
very spirited.
yeah. I would class myself as a sports fan, so hockey is still very enjoyable to go to. But it's a little different this year because we've had a very mild winter up here, like very mild by Minnesota standards. But if you ever fly into Minneapolis, St. Paul in the kind of evening time, you'll see all of the home built rinks in people's backyards all through the cities. And that just
Really?
shows you, yeah, that just shows you like how big hockey is around here. Like people will construct and flood their backyards in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, just so they can have a rink for their kids to play hockey after
Wow.
school. It's very cool.
Wow, I had no idea that was even a thing.
Yeah,
That's very cool.
yeah,
And then it melts and then it goes away at the end of
exactly.
the
Yep.
summer or in the end
This
of the
year's
winter.
has been so warm that I would imagine it'd be hard to maintain those.
Interesting. That's very cool. Well, I'm in Atlanta. I love Atlanta. I'm from South Carolina, which is about 2 hours north of Atlanta. And we moved here to take on a client relationship with a big apparel brand about 10 years ago. And so, but we just love the weather. It's more south than where we were in South Carolina, but it's actually a lot cooler because it's like 1,000 feet in the air. There's some elevation to Atlanta.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's just beautiful. Like the neighborhoods here are just like incredible. And there's hundreds of restaurants. They call it a city in a forest. And that's really true. It's very green, very vibrant, but still lots of business opportunities and lots of great restaurants and things to do. So
Oh,
if you ever
great.
want to come down, you let me know.
I've only been a few times. I was there in December. We weren't able to connect, but yeah, I don't know Atlanta nearly as well as you're describing it, but love to get down there a little bit more.
Yeah. If you ever come for Modex or something.
There you go.
Um, And I was actually the only time I've ever been up to where you are. I was in the airport one time there, and it was a pretty
Oh,
nice airport.
it is a nice airport. The Delta hub. Yep.
Yeah, I love Delta. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I feel like anyone's that's gonna show up is gonna be here. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, Tony? And I know just from our talks in the past that you've actually been at SPS a long time. So tell us a little bit about your career and what you've done at SPS over the years, and
Sure.
let us know who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can introduce SPS Commerce for those that maybe haven't heard of us either. But yeah, Tony Thrasher. Uh, I'm on our one of our directors in our product management organization. So one of our product management leaders at SPS, and I've been here for about 15 years. It's the vast majority of my professional experience in this, let's call it retail supply chain technology sector, if you will. And again, for those that aren't as familiar with SPS Commerce, that's really the type of technology solutions we provide, very focused on retail supply chain. And really all of our solutions that we provide are centered on the collaboration and in a lot of ways the data exchange that takes place between a retailer, so grocer, a distributor, an e-tailer, a big box retailer, anyone that's really purchasing finished goods, oftentimes in wholesale quantities to then resell to the end consumer. Uh, the collaboration between those entities and their immediate downstream or upstream trading partners in the supply chain. So their suppliers, which would be brands, manufacturers, CPG companies, et cetera. So we have, various technology solutions that help with the various data exchanges, whether it be item information, inventory levels, order, shipment, invoice, et cetera. A lot of times we'll be associated with EDI because that is the kind of chosen technology of many of those retailers, but certainly not limited to that particular technology set. So, but yeah, in my specific role as a product leader, I spend a lot of my time in this 3PL space. We offer products to 3PLs that are a part of that exchange between retailers and their suppliers. And then I also have some responsibilities on the partnership side of our business and some strategic partnerships that we're investing in as well. So yeah, I get the opportunity to work with a lot of brands. We have about 45,000 subscribing brand customers, if you will, merchants that use our services and pay us monthly for those services. We have, over 2,000 3PLs that we work with. So I get the opportunity to speak and work with many of them. And then you could think of just about pretty much every North American retailer based on that kind of definition I gave earlier. We have them pre-wired, if you will, into the network. So we interact with them as well. So over the last 15 years, seeing all kind of facets of the business, I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time talking with merchants of all sizes, merchants getting into the retail for the first time, merchants on their 111th retailer relationship. So just, hopefully can bring some of those experiences and expertise to the conversation today.
That's awesome. Yeah. That was a thing that we, when we started talking about doing this, we were really interested in a partnership because well, I guess I'll back up and just tell you who I am and what we do. So this kind of all makes sense. But my name's Courtney Folk. I'm the owner of Renewal Logistics. My husband and I own the company. We are a 3PL that specializes in the fashion industry. So fulfillment for the fashion industry. And we help apparel brands and shoe brands and some CPG and some purses and accessories companies, beauty companies as well, basically get their product to stores and front doors. And we actually, kind of similar to you, been doing the same thing for quite a while with the same company. We started in 2013 and working in the fulfillment space. And we were in a different industry. We're in the insurance restoration industry, and we helped customers get their lives back after house fires by cleaning their apparel items and their fabric items in their home. And then we were approached by one of the biggest companies in the U.S. that's probably you have a couple of their items on right now. Like it's not Under Armour, but they're like a brand that's actually larger than Under Armour. And so, or a bunch of brands that are under, a conglomerate. But they had a big issue. They needed to have a lot of units. They needed to have like 300,000 units processed in like 2 weeks to be able to be shipped into a number one wholesaler. And they had a lot of concerns about compliance and like chargebacks, and it just went perfectly for them. They had zero issues. And then at that point they were like, we've never used 3PLs before because they've never been able to kind of adjust enough to our business to where it worked for us. But we really want to see how deeply we can grow a strategic partnership with our companies. So that's actually, they put us in the business, and we
Great.
Still have an amazing relationship with them now. One of our locations is actually almost in their parking lot. So we're very tightly knit. And then, and now we also work with small and medium-sized brands, apparel companies and fashion companies. And we take what we've learned from the global scale operations and kind of help them figure out that arc to be able to grow from being that small, medium size to a much larger player in the market. And what I was going to say is that, so when we started working with these giant brands, and we have a bunch of giant brands as well, but they all kind of had their own system. They had like Manhattan or whatever it was. And so we just kind of had a couple of their terminals put in our building, and it just worked. But then when we started trying to work with some of the small and medium-sized companies, we were learning about EDI for the first time from a standpoint of how do you set up all the technology. And you kiss a lot of frogs sometimes when you're first figuring things out. And it was like, a lot of our brands would we'd be like, well, who do you want to use? We wouldn't kind of dictate who they should use.
Sure.
And it was kind of like the cheapest option possible. But a lot, like what we found was that things that should have taken a couple weeks to plug in and get moving would take months and months. And there's a tremendous amount of babysitting. And when we finally started working with you guys, it was just so, it was like a breath of fresh air. It was like just this huge relief because it was almost immediately plug and play because you already had all these connections built. And
Mm-hmm.
then we weren't the ones having to babysit the integration process. Y'all were like on it. It was just amazing. And so now we actually use you guys. We check with you first before anything else or anyone else when it comes to if this particular thing we need to accomplish is something that you guys can do. And so it's been a great relationship with SPS so far. So
Likewise. I know we feel that's a great story. I feel like I've heard you tell that a few times just through introductions, but just like to hear how you guys evolved into a business. It's always unique, and I always give credit. Like I've worked for SPS for a while. I don't have the entrepreneurial spirit quite like you. So for you to see the opportunity and then go after it, kudos to you and the rest of the team for sure.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I dye my hair every 2 weeks, so I have a lot more gray than you do. So I'm not saying that being an entrepreneur is the best fit. I think, it's a lot, but it's been fun. And it's been what's most rewarding to me. I think it's the same for y'all is that I just love knowing that we had a part in helping someone else be successful. I just think that's just really exciting. And to be able to do it on a large scale is really fun and see like, magnitudes of order in terms of customers growing is exciting. So, well, let's talk a little bit about EDI and kind of what we were thinking when it came to putting together this webinar.
Yeah.
I know on our side, we've seen a lot of brands that were like really heavy duty D2C during COVID. A lot of that's changing now. The way people are buying is changing now, and they're reverting a lot back to the wholesale, going into people are wanting to go into stores and see product. And so, what are you seeing the same thing? Like, how are you seeing the landscape shift when it comes to purchasing decisions?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. And we get a lot of our customers, I'll kind of can break it down for you. I reference a little bit of the intro, but like we get a lot of our customers right out of the gates when they get into retail for the first time. So in terms of like the whole theme here of like removing the fear factor, we get to see that kind of phenomenon, if you will, play out often. And we have like our product lines, we have ones that are very tailored for that exact use case. And then we have the ability to grow all the way up to very large brands like the size of ones that you were representing earlier as well. So like we always have the same narrative. And you talk with these customers, it's, I finally got into Target or I got into Walmart. Like you were saying, a lot of times they come from a D2C brand and that's part of their goal. And then they land that. And then they start getting okay, now here are all the things you're going to have to do, like EDI. And then our customers always joke, like, I didn't even know how to spell EDI. Right. And it's like, yeah. So it's like, but then there's everything else that goes with that dynamic. So our ability to almost, like you and I have both used this phrase. And I think this is maybe where we found common ground in one of our first introductions and conversations was we look at it as getting an A with your retailer, with your retailer customer. And EDI is a portion of that. Many of them are going to require that piece of technology, but it's not the technology side of EDI. I think that is, if you're working with an EDI provider, you can do the technology piece. It is the business process that surrounds that EDI. It's understanding, exactly why your retailer wants a particular piece of information, the timeliness of the information that they want. It's understanding the chargeback program for that retailer, or how you get your promotion details to them, or how you book freight with them if they're going to own the freight on their account. There's all of these surrounding kind of business processes that you have to understand. And I know when talking with you, that's a big part of the service, not just the technology that you provide your customers. And we like to think of it that same way, very much the technology, yes, but also kind of the people, the process, the expertise to, really remove that fear or coach our customers on what it takes when they first get into that, retail deal, if you will. And then every retailer thereafter is easier, but still has nuances that you also have to learn. So
Yeah, and that so you're right. Like with us, we kind of our big thing when we realized that we were able to really give this like our service back to other companies, it was when we were asked by like a top 3 company to handle their chargeback program for Kohl's. Like they were really struggling. They were like a D vendor with Kohl's, and they were getting chargebacks that were like $800 a case if the case label had a smudge on the barcode.
right.
And it was just like it was getting out of hand for them, and it was just a matter of not having enough people and not having enough consistent people, because a lot of large companies have to use temp labor, and they just couldn't get the bench of workers. And even when they could, then it wasn't an organized enough process to where everything stayed consistent. So for us, the question was, would you mind helping us with this? And we were like, yeah, absolutely. We'll do anything you want us to do. We'll dig a ditch in your backyard if you're going to pay us well for it. And so, we actually managed about 6 million units for them, and we had less than 50 defects that first year. And we've done about 25 million units for them since then. And it's all about understanding. It's exactly what you said. It's all about understanding that customer. It's all about understanding specifically what Kohl's is looking for,
Mhm.
and then giving it to them consistently. Like I heard someone on the Tory Burch Foundation the other day say that like meeting expectations is really underrated. And
Yeah.
actually, if you think about that, that's a good point, because for all of us, like, we're cogs in a wheel a little bit, like we were talking the last time we got together about like how, I never like it when people are like, well, they just, retailers just love chargebacks because they're making money off of them. And maybe they are, and that's fine. But our job is to understand our customer. It's not to complain about our customer. And our job is to understand what a brand needs to be successful with that customer and give that to them so that they can really do a good job with that retailer and become an A player for them, like you're talking about. And just thinking about the fact that, like, let's talk about Kohl's. They have a bunch of cross dock facilities,
Yep.
right? And so like you bring product into that building, and if the label's crooked and the barcode's wrinkly and it can't be scanned, it's going to have to be taken off of the conveyor. But if it doesn't have to be taken off the conveyor and it can work through the process, a case can come in on one side and go through their conveyor system and their scan points and never touch a single person's hand. And it can be routed out to, the 30 different trucks that they have that are going to different stores on the backside of the building in less than 15 minutes. So,
Yeah.
it's an amazing system that these huge retailers have created. If we can do our job right to help the merchants get that product into the building and basically to be invisible. Like that's what I always tell people is like, if you're invisible, if we're invisible for our customers, that means everything's going well for them and things are going the way that they're supposed to. So, but in that first year working with that account that was selling into Kohl's, we were able to bring them to like a B level within 6 months. And then quickly after that, they became an A. And I don't know if you, I feel like I've talked a lot, but I would like to say one more thing on this topic, which is the penalty for having chargebacks and how that scale going from like an A player to a B player to a C player. I think that's really interesting and important for people to understand. When you're an A player, you have, I think it's like a 1% quality inspection. So if someone brings in 1,000 cases, if someone buys 1,000 cases, they're going to inspect 1% of 1,000. Where if they, once you become like a B player and a C player and a D player, that inspection amount goes to like 5%, 10%, 15%, up to where you can have 100% inspection. And not only does that the percentage scale, but the actual dollars of the chargeback costs go up. So like something that might start as $25 for a chargeback can become like $800 for a chargeback if you're
It'll
even.
build. Yep, it'll build. It's like, yeah, it's if you're lower on the, we're making up the grading scale to a certain extent, but if you're lower on that scale, right, then you're more likely you're going to get more scrutiny, and then you're going to have those accelerated things too. So it's just, that expectation, and you want to be in really good standing. To your point, it's like you want to be that invisible, hey, I'm doing everything that it takes to make this relationship successful, just like any relationship. So, if you're getting, the retailer doesn't necessarily want to charge you back. I mean, you could talk about how it's a revenue stream and stuff like that, but they're ultimately doing it because if you aren't operating a certain way, why should they be the ones that have to take the efficiency hit? Why should they have to pay for the fact that they can't automatically receive the goods in their distribution center? Have to set them aside and have someone manually open the box because you didn't provide the correct labeling just to identify what order that particular shipment was from, right? So,
Exactly. Yeah.
They're doing it because they're trying to run an efficient operation and ultimately serve us as end consumers. They're running tight margins just like everybody else. So, I think that.
And to your point about serving the consumers, like, I mean, when's the last time you went into a store and you picked up something and the label in the back of the shirt said like a large, and then you look at the hang tag that's on the sleeve and it says like a small? Like that never happens. Like the fact that system is in place has given us as buyers an incredible retail experience for the most part, so it's very purposeful. And I think for you guys, like one place that I just think it's just been so, helpful is when someone brings on a new retailer, they're always like, how do I do this? It's a 150-page guide. The vendor guide is huge. Like, what do I do? And then you have like, I always joke about EDI that like there's the 835 and it's going to turn into the 836 when it comes back. And then you got the 944 and the 945 and the 747. And it's like all these numbers. And you're like, what do these numbers even mean? Like it can make your head spin. Like there's a lot of numbers. So can you talk a little bit about like that?
I've known EDI, the EDI numbers for, I remember when I started here, we had a sheet that had like all the EDI numbers. That was like part of the training curriculum, right? So you could just like quickly reference it and you highlight the ones you hear all the time, just so you could go from number to business context really quick. It's like, I've been living and breathing EDI every day for 15, 16 years. And I still get documents that I have to like refresh myself on the Google machine. Like, what is the, 750, 370, well, those I know because we see them all the time, but it's kind of crazy. You always got to get back to that business process of what that document is actually representing, right? Like what is the purpose for it? Why is a retailer actually asking for it? And that kind of centralizes you and gets you out of the numbers game, if you will. But to your point on the vendor guide, I want to touch on this, like those vendor guides. One of the things that we always like to say this, or I always like to say this, like using Target, and Target's right down the road from our office, Minneapolis. So if I use them, it's more of a proximity thing than anything else. But working with Target is working with Target. But you mentioned this before, the cross-docking, the fulfillment model inside of Target really makes it so that if you're shipping cross-dock to a particular retailer, or shipping bulk direct to store, or shipping into their distribution center bulk that isn't a cross-dock model, or you're doing drop ship, like it's almost like you're working with individual retailers inside of it. But now take your vendor guide example, right? Like, I got a question for you. Preparing for this, I just did a little vendor guide reading, and I stumbled upon Walmart's secondary packaging supplier guide. So this is the guide that tells you all the things you need to know for packaging when you're shipping things to Walmart across all their fulfillment models. I'll come back to that point. How many pages long do you think that one document is? This isn't the EDI specs. This is just their packaging guide.
Just their packaging guide. 25 pages.
Yeah, yeah.
Can we talk about this?
240.
Right, isn't it?
Page 214 pages.
Oh, okay.
214 pages, which is like, I mean, I would venture a guess it's probably the longest one out there, which is maybe why I picked it. But inside of there is, you're still looking, there's only a certain portion of that that's probably applicable to your business with Walmart.
Right.
Every
Yeah.
single time I'm shipping, cross dock to Walmart or whatever the model may be based on my product category or arrangement with them, there's a certain portion of that I need to know. And all too often we hear of, whether talking with other 3PLs that are servicing their customers, the supplier to a retailer, or talking with a customer, it's like a lot of times people kind of learn the vendor guides as they go.
Mhm.
It's like, well, we're just gonna start here and then almost get infractions until we get better behavior. So it's just like, to your point, you're just like automatically saying I'm going to start as a D or a C student and then try to get to an A versus start as an A. But it takes time to understand and kind of break down the expectations. And that's where EDI gets an interesting rap sometimes. I'll be at conferences or chatting with folks, and people will come up and they associate SPS with EDI, and rightfully so. And they'll ask questions like, why is EDI so hard? Or you'll get the narrative. This is my favorite, is API is going to replace EDI. It's like, how long have we all been hearing that? And it's not the EDI happens to be the format that retailers many years ago kind of came together and decided that they were going to create some efficiencies in the supply chain for them, each of themselves, by providing a more standard experience for each of their suppliers. Typically a supplier is going to ship into more than one retailer. So if they do it once and do it twice, there's a better chance that each retailer gets a better experience with their suppliers. But it's not the EDI standard itself, and like the technology side of EDI isn't, in my opinion, the challenge. Like, who cares if it's JSON API or CSV or whatever? Pick your favorite format and connectivity method. It's the fact that there's an entire business process and data requirement that EDI represents. You have to understand the business process and probably evolve your business processes. If you've just been shipping direct to consumer and you think you're just going to continue to be able to do that and now ship B2B into a Target facility, you're probably fooling yourself a little bit. But then each retailer is going to be similar because they kind of have that standard. So in that way, EDI is beneficial. But everybody's got their nuances, right? Like our favorite, like pull out of the back of your, or at least is my favorite, pull out of your back pocket example is, if you're shipping to Amazon and you're part of the They Pay Freight program, which basically means you are the one paying for freight as the shipper. So the brand, you have to provide them the appointment number and you have to schedule the appointment for when that freight is going to be delivered in a particular window for that facility. If that appointment number isn't on the advanced ship notice that goes to them to connect the dots and the receivables to that appointment, you're going to get a chargeback. So, but that's a nuance for Amazon warehouse and shipping into Amazon. If most retailers have their kind of set of nuances there. So it's not that EDI is hard. It's that B2B retail, when you have every retailer that has similar but still different requirements, and you're working with several of them, and each of them have different fulfillment models, you got to be able to juggle all that stuff, or you have a partner that can help you juggle all that stuff. So I went on a little bit there, but
I've heard before. Well, I guess I have a couple thoughts on what you're saying. I think, like, for one, can you imagine trying to be like Dillard's or Target and do it the way that you do it with e-com, right? Like, e-com is like, okay, the order dropped into my system. I'm going to upload a tracking number, and then they're going to get an email that says their order has shipped. Like, can you imagine like trying to conduct business with Target when they're dealing with millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of units a day via email? Like, it doesn't work. So you have to like level up your business. And like, so I've heard a lot of times that when, that companies will think about their product first. But the companies that are really going to scale are the ones that think about the distribution. Like, the distribution is almost more important than the product, right? And I mean, obviously, that's the name of the game with retailers is the distribution process rather than the actual product, because the products constantly change.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to be able to scale that method of communication on these multiple different types of products so that that distribution model can work. And you know, like, so some retailers you're looking at just plugging in an ASN and routing information. Some retailers will use, I want to give a little context to what you're saying about everyone is a little bit different. So
Yeah.
some will have favorite EDI functions, like they'll want to do all of their change orders via EDI rather than trying
Mm-hmm.
to email change orders, because changes happen a lot on these POs when it comes to different brands and their product going into the retailers. Some do payment notification via EDI. There's
Yep.
a lot of
Yep.
different types of notifications that you can receive, and then some of the ways that they can also be a little different is that you know, like black. Let's say the color black. The code for one retailer, it may be BLK. For another,
Mm-hmm.
it just may be B. It may be BK. So
Absolutely.
having to be able to like get through the testing process when it comes to those labels to make sure that that has been done properly when you're setting up a new account. Those are the types of things that we run into a lot when it comes to setting up new people and just making sure that all the pieces kind of flow and work together. Um,
But even
so,
just
you know,
knowing the right questions to ask makes a world of difference, right? Just the way you're talking about it, it's like you've done this a few times with several customers and several retailers. You just kind of get to be familiar with the type of information you need to know up front to make sure you're even, quote unquote, getting the EDI right, if you will. So
yeah, and you were talking about the manual, and you're right. Like those vendor guides are crazy big,
mhm, mhm.
like hundreds and hundreds of pages. And so, and I guess you guys manage. You said you have how many? 5,000 retailers in the U.S.
Yeah, that's the rough number, more or less, but right around that number. And really, we're adding them every single day. Anytime our customer has a, let's like retailer, if you will, that we haven't seen before, we build them out and start learning their vendor guides and their business processes. So they just kind of instantly become part of the network, if you will, as our customer base grows.
That's amazing. And I thought it was really interesting too how you said that, like, you know, when you're dealing with a new brand that's coming, that's using you, that you guys will actually represent them on calls with
Oh,
the
sure.
retailers. You're their IT person when it comes to making sure that the exchanges are set up properly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we consider our service a full service EDI solution using that terminology, which means it's not just the technology, not buying a piece of technology to run and then you staff people. It's, we're going to, you kind of talked about this in terms of, your experience working with SPS is, you got the project management resources. If something happens during testing with Target, we're going to pick up the phone and call Target on your behalf and sort it out, right? Like the EDI team at Target is going to speak a certain language, and you can either learn how to speak that language, or like we speak in that language all day, every day with all these different retailers, so we can really help that out. But even coordinating it, understanding the testing scenarios, how you have to sign yourself up on the EDI portal to make sure you're ready to go, like all of those types of things, like we kind of help you with that entire process. But yeah, if there's something that's going wrong with your advanced ship notices to Target, for example, and someone needs to call Target and get it figured out, like that would be SPS Commerce on behalf of our customers, which we think is a major differentiator for the service we provide. And kind of to the theme of this, right? It's like removing that fear factor on B2B. It's like
Mhm.
you might not want to just take on that conversation, nor is maybe that the best use of your time to take on that conversation. Like you're focused on
Exactly.
selling to the next retailer or getting, more throughput, or keeping them happy in other ways. You can, the EDI side of it sometimes can be handled a different way. So
Almost that whole being invisible, kind of like what I was talking
yeah,
about before, you know, like if it's not a pain point, then you're doing your job right, and if you can kind of
Absolutely.
absorb that pain for that customer so that so it doesn't have to be a pain point, even if the road does get bumpy for a minute, it's really nice. And
Sure.
the one other thing I think is really important to talk about too is that, when people are thinking about B2B, so like, um, I have a bunch of designer friends, and it's interesting when you're sitting around and you're just chit-chatting, and you've got some that are like, I am never getting into wholesale ever. I'm never going to work with majors because I'm going to get eaten alive by the fees, and it's so much money to set up the new wholesale relationships. Like the EDI process is
Mhm.
so expensive it can break you. But the other thing I think is pretty amazing about SPS that's very different than other companies is that you've got kind of with the fact that you've got the portal that you have. The way you
Mhm.
guys thought about this all those years ago was really, really smart, because there's not I mean, there are some EDI partners that try to do something similar, but pretty much with other ones, in my experience, has been that they expect every single connection that you do with a new retailer, you have to pay for the full build out of that integration. And with you guys, it's like maybe they're going to do 5 orders and test out this retailer, and they don't want to spend a ton of money on the actual, building some sort of an integration. You've got a portal where you can go in and you can kind of like manually do it 2 or 3 times a year if needed. Like, it's possible to do a very low cost solution with you guys where it's not
Absolutely.
necessarily that way with other companies.
I mean, some of the relationships or even document requirements inside of a relationship, it just doesn't pay to fully automate it. Or if you get into a retail relationship for the first time and you're not even entirely sure how much volume is going to come of it, like why jump to a full blown integration project, if you will? So yeah, it's like actually like out of all of our subscribing customers, and I dropped the 45,000 number earlier. You'd be surprised at the percentage that don't use our portal capacity in one way, shape, or form, right? Whether it be for one particular relationship or a certain document set that they just don't want to automate, like, so it's, there's ways to keep it less costly. You don't have to jump into a full IT project to fully automate into your ERP. We have plenty of customers that do because it makes sense for them to do that at a certain point in their growth trajectory. And we kind of grow with those customers through that. Yeah.
And you can probably just kind of, like, hey, we noticed you're hitting this volume. Have you considered, and can you help with the like doing the cost analysis? And I'm putting you on the spot with this, I'm sorry, but can you help with like, hey, you're at about the right threshold where we see other customers will automate this process, and kind of offer to help do that cost analysis for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at some point there becomes an ROI exercise
Exactly.
in terms of how much you're going to manually input those orders into sales orders into your ERP versus having that done automatically. Plus the other benefits that you get by, just having those plugged into some of the systems you use and run your business. So yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, we've been talking with you guys a lot about helping some customers automate some of their order management systems through their ERP, and
Mhm.
so I don't know. There's so many nuances. Every single company is different. You know, there's a million different combinations of ERPs and OMSs and TMSs, and so many different pieces that come together. And yeah, and I've just always been really impressed with how you guys have been able to kind of like pull all the pieces together to make it work. And
Yep. And as soon as
it's
you
that's
get, I mean, as soon as just to touch on that, too, like as soon as you get outside of the majors, it's like there's the unwritten rule aspect of the vendor guides too that you're really only going to get through experience and learning. So it's not every retailer writes it down and covers every single one of their expectations. So there is just that aspect of, you know, we have an entire kind of internal system where we capture this information and curate it and leverage it with our customers. And venture guess that a lot of that is through experience, not necessarily through the written vendor guides, if you will. So there's that aspect of it too. So
Yeah, that's like Amazon. Amazon is a big one where they write the rules as they go, and then they tell you what the rules are afterward, after
totally.
they find you.
Courtney,
Um,
question for you, just in terms of like we've talked a lot about kind of the landscape and we've maybe instilled a little bit of fear, if you will. What are some of the like, you know, avoiding the fear side, like what are some of the pitfalls that you have run into with customers? Because like I'm making the assumption here that some of your customer base has, maybe they're getting into retail for the first time and you're able to coach them up, or maybe they've done it before and are coming to you for a better solution. But just from like your perspective, what are some of the pitfalls, and then maybe even like success stories that you've seen of folks that are kind of getting into B2B and having to manage some of these challenges for the first time?
Yeah. So, I think that like some of the pitfalls that a lot of brands go through when they're first either trying to get into retail for the first time, or even they've been in retail for a while and they don't have a cohesive solution. So I was telling you, we work in the fashion industry a lot. So if you think about fashion, you have 6 seasons a year. So you have like pre-spring, spring, pre-summer, summer, fall. You got all these different seasons. So you've got like 6 week seasonality. And if you have stock split between like a D2C 3PL versus a B2B 3PL, a lot of 3PLs just don't kind of do both very well. A lot of them either do B2B really well, which is case in and case out, or they do, every unit's in a poly bag, but they have no idea how to handle the EDI components and how to manage the compliance levels that are required with retailers. And so keeping it all clean for everyone is really hard. So in a case like that, an apparel company is then, having to double buy stock, because you've got to have some stock here and some stock here, where if you have it all in one place, then you can kind of pull your stock and have some available to sell. If orders don't go through that Macy's placed, or they did a change order at the last minute, you can make that stock immediately available on your website, and you're not having to transfer goods, and you're not having to double pay for shipping on goods that may be coming from different distribution centers. And then, the other piece of that is returns. If you think about how much seasonality you have, you're really going to be hit double if you've got a B2B stock level and a D2C stock level, because you're already splitting inventory twice. And then if you have a high return rate and it's not getting back into stock fast enough, then you're paying for that lag time of getting that stock back into getting those returns back into stock. So a lot of times, if you can kind of like co-locate your B2B, your D2C, and your returns in one place, you can get the same amount of sales with 30% less inventory. So that's a really big thing that that brands that are starting to scale kind of really need help with. And then the other thing is, like, if you're in most regular 3PLs don't really want to do apparel because there's so many SKUs. So
Right.
you end up paying more for multiple SKUs. And then whenever peak season arises, a lot of times it's the simplest and easiest product that's going to be prioritized, because if you're going to have to upset some customer because you didn't have enough stock come in or enough people come in that day to process the orders, if you can have someone sitting there and they're just shoving one unit of one SKU of one unit into a bag and over and over and over again, it's very different than having to stand up and walk and pick items that are going to be, maybe you have 3 or 4 different SKUs that are going to go out in one order. Or in the case of retail, maybe you're going to have a few hundred SKUs that are going to go out with one order. So there's a tremendous amount of complexity that comes with apparel that is just uncomfortable for a lot of 3PLs that are doing the D2C as well as the B2B, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, like we work with plenty of customers, depending on their product category or what they're selling, where you can get away with having a 3PL partner on the East Coast and a 3PL partner on the West Coast. And we still see like folks will try to centralize their direct to consumer over here and B2B over out of this facility. Sometimes even separate those by 3PLs, which can cause challenges too. Then you got a really kind of stark line between your inventory, if you will. But yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense from an apparel perspective. We're just even attempting to do that with all the different SKUs would be a heck of a challenge. And the returns piece that you touched on, that really brings it to life. Like, which facility would you return it to if you had it in multiple, and how much you're going to pay to move things around from there. So, That makes a lot of sense. Most of our, actually, like a lot of our customers will work with, multiple 3PLs. But I would say that a lot of folks, you know, there's opportunity for everybody to kind of optimize how they're allocating their inventory geographically. But we have a lot of customers that aren't apparel that, that type of strategy works. But you got to think it through. You got to talk with, the 3PLs that have helped their customers with that type of strategy. Like I would have to imagine a customer come and work with you for the first time. That's, you can either learn all those things or like Courtney can probably sit down over a TV show and walk you through it. I was going to say beverage, but you say you don't drink that much. So
Yeah. And like, and I think the other thing too is, and it is, in some cases it's great, but generally you're not going to see very many apparel companies that are going to have more than like an East Coast and a West Coast location. Like, and because there's a balance between the cost savings on shipping versus the amount you're paying in storage to store those units. But the other piece of it that's also kind of interesting when it comes to like working with the right partner is, so like, let's say that you receive in 1,000 new SKUs, you receive in your summer line, and you have all these orders that are on hold now, that are like wholesale orders that are waiting to ship out, and they're waiting for certain SKUs to ship out. And let's say you receive 75% of those, 25% of them didn't. If you're not set up to do both at the same time, like the main reason most companies don't do both is because of the fact that inventory allocation can be really, really challenging. So like you can have all of those goods are immediately plugged into those wholesale orders, and then you're out of stock for your D2C orders. And so then if you don't have like the right systems in place, then you can end up showing out of stock online. And so there's a lot to the timing of it all, and making sure you have your replenishment set up properly so that you can kind of support with IT as well as with operational solutions to be able to protect against those types of things, because that is the issue, is that you are serving two masters, and if you're not careful, you're filling this one order for Macy's and then it doesn't leave you any stock on the other side. So how do you balance that, and how do you look at that on a daily basis to make sure that you're able to get everything out on time? There's a lot of timing pieces to that to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that just gets to the transparency. Like I'm sure, like when you're working with your customers, very aligned to their strategy, and then your ability to kind of execute on that strategy. We run into those conversations between our 3PL customers and their customers on a regular basis, right? Like, and you kind of overlay some of what you're talking about in terms of inventory allocation with then some of the expectations that the retailer is going to expect of you. Like the purchase order acknowledgement document is a great example of this, because they're going to oftentimes want that returned 24, 48 hours from the original purchase order. So to your point, someone's got to make the decision, and it might be collaboration between you and your 3PL, or an understanding of your, let's call it allocation strategy when an order comes in. So yeah, I think that's a really good pitfall to not have that completely thought through.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of moving parts to the business that we're in, but I think it's just, like I said, it's really fun. It's really fun to help people, but it's also really fun to work in a business where there's like fancy clothes everywhere. That's my favorite part.
Now we're getting down to reality. Yeah. Totally.
That's funny. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that we wanted to cover on this first kind of go, when we were talking about kind of like mapping out and kind of demystifying what going into retail looks like. I think one thing that you wanted to mention or hit on was like when it comes to 3PLs working with SPS, like the value for a 3PL. And I think I mentioned this early on, but I just think it's really important to say again that like there are a lot of 3PLs now that are getting into wholesale for the first time, because D2C is kind of taking a back seat to the more, in-store sales process that most people are kind of interested in, the experience of being in stores. And again, like it was pushing a boulder uphill for a very, very long time when we first were going through that learning curve. and we grew like a rocket once we started our relationship with you
Yeah.
guys. And so much of the sales process is you eliminate a lot of friction from that sales process because you make it easy and you make it fast. And not only friction for 3PL to sell a brand, but then most especially for a brand to be able to sign up with a new retailer and have a system and a solution in place really quickly.
Right. Right.
So kudos to you guys on that. I'm telling you, we've had some horror stories. I don't want to talk about your competition or my competition really, but
We'll
I will
save
tell
that
you.
for the after recorded session of this, and then you could spill all the tea. How about
Yeah.
that? No, here's what I think, Courtney, and like I know you and I are. I mean, we're still getting to know each other, but we've known each other for several months now at this point, and we have the kind of customer technology provider flavor. But I think the thing that we can appreciate, and we bring this sentiment to all of our 3PL customers, and I appreciate that shout out, is like your success is the same as our success, right? Like you are ultimately trying to make your customers as successful as possible, which oftentimes means that they're in really good standing and as successful as possible with their, customers, which are oftentimes, B2B retail, right? So we're in the exact same boat. We want to make you successful, which means we want to make the supplier successful. So to your point, it's, you know, we work with 3PLs that are just getting into retail for the first time often, just like we work with brands that are getting into like retail or this B2B world for the first time. And I think you have that common ground where there's certain areas that you could lean on us to try to understand, and there's certain areas where we would lean on you to understand, but ultimately we're kind of both serving the merchant who's then in turn selling to the retailer. So I think that's where it kind of makes it natural, because it's not like we have a different purpose or a different agenda necessarily. Like we want to make your customers successful because we know if we make your customers successful, we're going to make you successful, and then you're going to be happy with the service we're providing. So, I think there's a lot of overlap, but probably just more like synergy in the way that you approach things with the way we approach things. And that's probably why the partnership's been pretty natural.
Yeah, it reminds me, what you're saying reminds me of Sarah Blakely, and so Spanx, and
Oh,
hearing about how she decided on key people in her company. Like she would hire, COOs or whatever, and they would have great strategies for making a lot of money, but they would not necessarily be the right culture fit if they did not understand that every decision she made was about putting her customer first, right? Like, so the person who is buying her product, how does this decision relate back to that person that's buying this product? Okay, so we make more money on selling on our website versus, Macy's or Amazon. Who cares? It's not about how much money you make. It's about how accessible it is to the customer. And I think it's the same for us. I think, like technology providers, people who move boxes from one place to another in a building, you can get really caught up in the day-to-day, work orders and tickets and just your to-do list, and not be able to tie it back to how are you really, being significant to
right.
your client, and how are you helping them fulfill the promises that they made to their customers. It's like how are you helping them fill their brand promise, and I think I know for us that's like central to our culture, is talking about that all the time. Like, if you don't put this label on this box right, here's how it's going to impact the customer. But if you do it right, here's how it's also going to impact the customer, and here's how it's going to impact you. Like if you help this brand grow, you're going to be able to grow in this company. And I just think that like it's a part of like, it's really all about hiring the right people who share that mindset, and like and developing that within the team that you have. And that's also a very fun part of business.
Yeah, that sentiment that you just played out there, like your success is your customer's success, or more like you're treating their business like it's your business. Like you're putting your name on the quality of the product that you're providing, which is in turn what they're providing to their customers. And like that type of sentiment that's the type of sentiment that, not every 3PL out there has that sentiment. There's a lot of good ones out there that also have that sentiment too. And I know you have it in spades. So just speaking with you and being able to kind of soak that up. So that's great. So let me give you almost like a tee up to a wrap up here.
Okay.
Give me your kind of final, or let's say 2 takeaways. So you have like kind of final wrap, 2 takeaways from the conversation or just the topic in general, to leave people with that are listening to this. What would those 2 be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first one is, although retail is intimidating and it seems hard and it seems scary, it's not. And if you have the right guides to kind of walk you through the process, you can be very successful straight out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think secondly, just take the time and ask a lot of questions about whoever it is that you're working with, whether it's an EDI provider or a 3PL or, whatever else. I mean, what email company that you're planning to work with. I mean, there's, really just make sure that there's an alignment from a values perspective. But specifically with retail, I think it's really important to make sure there's an alignment from a values perspective.
I love it.
What about you?
Similar. Stole them. No, just kidding. I would say I just feel like all too often sometimes it is, we're going to learn as we go. And this maybe gets to your second one, which is like ask the right questions, make sure you're working with folks that have the experience or at least have enough of appreciation for the experience to start you out as an A or a B versus D, why not start the relationship as strong as you possibly can? And you're just in a better spot to do that if you're working with folks that have been there and done that. So, you're choosing the right partners. So that's definitely one of them. I'm trying to come up with a second one as well. It'd probably be going back to like the beginning part of the conversation is, appreciating the evolution of your business process that will take place. Your point, there is a lot there. If you're working with the right folks, it's not as scary, but you're obviously in business and successful to the point where you've gotten into retail.
Mm-hmm.
But also take the time to appreciate that, there's an evolution that's going to occur while you're getting into retail and the B2B world. So you're going to have to kind of evolve some of the business processes and augment the business processes that are already in place. So, have an open mind there, you're in terms of how you've got to kind of grow to accommodate as well. I think sometimes that'll trip people up thinking that they will just do this EDI thing and then not have to change the business process along with it. And you kind of got to do both to be successful.
That's a great point. That's a really great point. And taking it with stride, yeah, that's a great point. Well, so Tony, tell us, what is the best way for someone to reach out to you if they have more questions?
Oh, good. Yeah, good question. I think we'll probably flash up contact information, email, otherwise also like LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn at any time. I know that that's a lot of people's go-to. Always welcome those conversations. So yeah, if people just want to follow up, talk shop, or pick brain on a specific retailer or a process or SBS, happy to do so. So I think we'll leave those goodies with the attendees, but by all means, don't be afraid to reach out.
Awesome. And anyone that is interested in talking to me or to my company, we're definitely on LinkedIn as well. We're also on like Instagram, and our website is renewallogistics.com. Tell me, is your website spscommerce.com?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, great. Well, hey, it was really fun today. Thanks for your time, and I hope you have an awesome afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.